What's something that seems obvious to everyone else, but you only recently figured out? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. If someone constantly talks badly about everyone you know, they're also talking badly about you. I truly and embarrassingly thought my one friend who talked horribly about everyone we knew would just vent to me because she thought I was the only sane person in our friend group, until my other friend LMK that she talked about me atrociously to lol. Story 2. Literally discovered last year at 36 that blood sugar crashes aren't just one of those things. I was shaking and sweating and feeling dizzy and lightheaded, something I've experienced oodles of times in my life, and had been told by my mom when I was a child it was normal and to just eat a candy bar. My mother-in-law looked concerned and asked what was wrong, and I just laughed it off and said, "Oh, you know, when your blood sugar tanks and you feel like you're going to faint until you have something sweet, it's just that." And she said, No. She's 85 but has been in remarkable health her whole life, so I figured she was an anomaly. So I mentioned it to my husband when he walked in, and he said he'd never experienced that either. I have an adrenal disorder that causes dysglycemia. Here I've been toting candy bars around like fucking Willy Wonka my whole life, when I actually had something serious going on. Story 3. That kiwi fruit is not lip-puckering, mouth-tinglingly sour like a lemon or underripe pineapple. I am allergic to kiwis. I spent 2 decades of my life trying to figure out why strawberry kiwi flavored things did not taste like kiwi at all to me. Story 4. That there's such a thing being too agreeable. I would avoid difficult conversations in fear of upsetting people, but it was frustrating for everyone because I wasn't being fully honest. Saying oh it's okay and being quick to forgive eased my anxiety but fueled resentment. Story 5. My depression affects everyone who loves me. It's humbling, humiliating, and guilt-producing. However, it makes me realize how much my partner and family must actually love me. This is a tough gig that they show up to every day, and they deserve me trying my hardest to be well. Edited to add, thanks for the awards, internet friends. Wow, I did not expect this to resonate with so many people. I have started some new therapies lately that have helped me be more reflective and objective about my darkest times. It's helped me see how much I contribute to our family's well-being, or lack thereof, their sacrifices, and their ongoing commitment, yes, be my partner, to keep supporting me. I've been taking steps to unstick myself and show them appreciation and recognition to try to heal us all. I think I was pretty close to losing my partner in Gial. Story 6. Semi-recent. Back in my younger days, I used to chew a lot of gum. Didn't realize how obnoxious and loud I was until one day after a break between a meeting, one of the guests turned and started fake chewing, really loud in my face, and said that's what she was listening to all morning. I was mortified and never chewed gum in a meeting again. She was pretty high up there in rank too. Story 7. It only recently dawned on me that no one really knows what they're doing. Like in general, I always thought that adults, bosses, confident people, they understood everything. They have a clear plan. And then I started to notice that many people just pretend to be fumbling, but they learn as they go. And it's not scary, but on the contrary, it even calms down a little. It turns out that you don't have to wait until you're ready, but just start doing it. Making mistakes, learning is like everyone else. Story 8. How damaging extreme levels of introspection can be for your psyche, and how people can take advantage of it. Got out of friendship recently where I didn't realize how often I was bending over backwards and blaming myself for issues that weren't mine. I think it really hit home when my mom told me, "You need to be more arrogant." Story 9. My whole life I've been eating with my mouth open and didn't realize it was an issue until my boyfriend mentioned it 2 years ago. I proceeded to ask people at work about this and found out that people had been laughing behind my back about it the whole time. I just thought of every encounter I had in my life where I've eaten in public and people must have been disgusted, totally oblivious. Yaki says, how could I have not known I was like Homer Simpson eating all the donuts in hell? Story 10. That by denying myself the opportunity to pursue my childhood dream career, I was spending my adulthood looking for opportunities to cling to other people's dreams and make myself useful in them achieving those, so I felt a sense of purpose. I was self-abandoning, had no self-worth, would distract myself with others' problems and drive people away with my needy people-pleasing. Now at 27, I've connected the dots that in order to find purpose and fulfillment, I need to chase my own dreams, not others. Story 11, visual snow isn't something everyone sees. When I was little, I thought I was seeing molecules and tried to describe it to my mom, but she just made a joke about LSD and seeing trailers. Edit. I'm so glad I helped other people learn about this. Edit. This has nothing to do with actual precipitation. Please look it up before commenting if you are confused. Story 12. It would seem that every romantic partner and most friends I've ever had worked out that I was a narcissist long before I figured it out. I couldn't see my abusive behaviors because I was blinded by selfishness and entitlement. I wish I had taken notice 2 decades ago and saved a lot of people from the harm I caused them. I noticed that someone has awarded this comment, the first time that has happened to me over many years on Reddit, via many accounts. I appreciate that so much. I hope it helps someone else in my position to read this and realize they're not alone, and that they can be better if they decide to be. Story 13. I follow a bunch of book authors on social media, and suddenly everyone was talking about arcs and getting excited, but nobody explained what an arc was. It was a while before I got the right combination of search terms to get me the right definition that said it stood for Advanced Reader Copy. Story 14. It has only recently begun to dawn on me that most people actually feel something when they miss their friends and family. I thought this was just a polite thing to say. I didn't realize that people actually feel a kind of pain when they're away from their people and pets, and a kind of pleasure and desire toward being together with them again. Frankly, I'm damned jealous. You people have a reason to go on even in your darkest hours. I've never had any feelings like that. The only thing that keeps me going is guilt, because I'm told that the people who know me would feel shame if I were to head for the exit. If you actually have feelings about people, especially good feelings that keep you alive, count yourself lucky. Some of us have to chew on the gristle every minute, possibly for another 30 goddamn years or even more. Sorry, I guess I'm feeling a little bitter about it. Story 15. I just realized that when people say sleep on it, they literally mean to wait until the next day to make a decision. Not that you should think about it really hard while trying to fall asleep. I was losing sleep for years. Story 16. That there were actually 2 wicked witches in The Wizard of Oz. Like I knew there was the one who melts and the one who gets crushed by a house, but somehow until I rewatched the movie a couple weeks ago, I somehow thought they were the same witch. Story 17. I didn't realize that every year the U.S. spends $2 trillion more than we make, and Doge's goal is to reduce our debt by $2 trillion overall within 10 years, meaning the Repub's plan is to reduce $2 trillion as we rack up another $20 trillion in debt. There is no possible way we can recover from this level of stupid. Story 18. I have a moderate pectus excavatum. I had absolutely no idea until last month when a doctor doing an EKG asked if I'd ever seen a specialist about it. I called my mother, and she told me she noticed it when I was about 12. I have multiple doctor friends, and I asked them, and all of them noticed it and just assumed I knew. 2, I thought having an indent in your chest was totally normal. Story 19. That the moon is there in the sky during the day, not only at night. Edit. I meant the moon can be visible during the day and continue to be visible at night. I didn't mean that it will be visible for 24 hours. Me, like many people, thought the moon rises when the sun sets. This is how we learned it from these stupid cartoons. Story 20. No is a complete answer. You don't have to give context. You don't have to expand. You don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to cave in after the awkward silence that follows and change your answer to, oh, all right then. No is absolutely fine. They're asking because they know they can't tell you to do it. You're allowed to respond with no. Story 21. Someone saying, we should get coffee sometime, is a social nicety, not an actual invitation to make said plans. I have no idea how many people I've coerced into physically joining me at a cafe because they told me that we should get coffee sometime, and then I made the plans and they showed up. I don't like this though. Why can't you just say, it was nice seeing you, meeting you, if you don't want to actually get coffee? Story 22. The fact that cleaning teeth isn't just about rubbing off plaque, it's also about giving your teeth a fluoride shield because of the chemical reaction. Tooth enamel, toothpaste, felt really dumb. I have healthy teeth due to cleaning twice a day, but didn't grasp the concept for so long. Well, Story 23. I have a pill case, so I don't lose track of which meds I take, and so does my friend. I said I liked that hers started on Monday and not Sunday. It's always bothered me that mine starts on Sunday. She said it's the kind where you can move the days around. so she put Monday first. Mine is also the kind where you can move the days around. It had never occurred to me I could have done that with my free will. In Story 24. The meaning of the idiom, the exception proves the rule. My ND brain took it as, breaking a rule means the rule exists, which made no sense to me because the rule existing means it exists, right? Why would somebody breaking it prove it? Anyway, I was listening to a debate between a feminist and an anti-feminist. And the anti was trying to argue that feminists are exaggerating when they talk about historical oppression and started rattling off historical accomplishments of women. Women were writers in the 1800s. Women could be queens, etc. And then she dropped the tidbit that the first woman to own property in America lived in the 1600s. I was thinking, well, that's a bad faith argument. The existence of a handful of women who overcame oppression in a single area of life doesn't mean the oppression didn't exist. And that's when it clicked. The exception proves the rule. A woman owning property in the 1600s was so astonishing that the very fact of her existence is still being invoked some 4 centuries later. She's only worth mentioning at all because she's an anomaly, thereby proving the rule that yes, women were systemically prevented from property ownership during that time. Incidentally, I couldn't find the specific woman she was referring to. There were a small handful of women who managed to claim property in the colonies in the 1600s. But I did find that the first woman to have the right to control her own property legally granted in the United States was in 1837, and the property in question was enslaved people. So, okay, what rule that proves, except that if you scratch deep enough into any part of American history, you're bound to draw black blood. But finally getting that idiom was cool at least. Story 25. Only a few months ago, in my 40s, I found out not everyone sees colors when they think of words. Blew my mind. How do people remember appointments when they can't see the colors of the dates and times? Also, it turns out music doesn't come in shapes. Story 26. Maybe not recently, but it took until I was 17 years old to figure out that not everyone wakes up completely paralyzed and is stuck that way for anywhere between 5 minutes to an hour. It was a symptom of a sleep disorder, and I just thought everyone had it, and that's what they all meant when they said I literally couldn't get out of bed this morning. No, Stacy, you just don't know what the word literally means, and you slept through your alarm. I was trapped in my own body and terrified over it. Story 27. I have asthma and have known this fact for close to 40 years. What I did not know, however, was that people with asthma can't seem to take a full deep breath without feeling like there's a little extra. So I take a deep breath, but then I take a shorter deep breath to complete the routine. I found out this happened from Reddit, actually. A few years ago, there was a similar question asked, and someone said that, and that's when it clicked for me. Story 28. I was bulimic and had no clue. I'd get super anxious and run and throw up daily, but I'd just sort of see myself out. My dentist asked if I had an eating disorder, and I was like, ha ha ha, yeah, right, that's for models. Turns out I had an eating disorder. Story 29. How rude it was for me to show up late all the time. I'm a scattered person and always thought being late all the time was just a cute little quirk of mine. A few years ago, someone sat me down and said, look, when you're late, it tells the rest of us that you don't care about our time and company. It's incredibly disrespectful to always have to wait on you. I was horrified and ashamed to realize I'd been treating my friends so poorly and incredibly grateful that someone spelled it out for me. I'm basically always on time or early now. Story 30. That not everyone carefully considers which words to use or how to arrange the words to accurately reflect their meaning when speaking. For a long time, I didn't understand why people thought I meant something other than what I said. Then I realized it was because they didn't mean exactly what they said. Story 31. Every single person in your life has a different picture of you. The you think they see, the you see yourself as, is not how anyone else see you. Even your closest family and friends have an idea of you, and that idea is always at least a little different than how you see yourself. I made it sound profane, but in actuality, I recently realized that I can easily bullshit some people who think I'm much more capable and smarter than I truly am. I always thought those people were just nice, but nah. Turns out they fully believe some idealized version of me that they have constructed in their own heads. Story 32. That people make instant coffee by mixing the powder with water. It even shows this on the instant coffee we buy, but growing up, American-born but Indian family, Everyone mixed it with milk. I also have had straight espresso and drip coffee, so the idea of milkless coffee wasn't crazy to me, but for some reason, it just never occurred to me how most Americans drink instant coffee. Story 33. Taxation without representation didn't mean high taxes. It meant that at the time, King George enacted tariffs on his own without going through the proper channels of having Parliament pass the new taxes. So these taxes have not been considered through the representatives of the people in Parliament, thereby making the taxes without representation. Story 34. I'm in my late 40s, and I recently figured out that I have a mild allergy to sodium lauryl sulfate, often found in mouthwash and toothpaste. I was complaining to my boyfriend about how I don't like how using mouthwash makes the inner lining of my cheeks peel at night. I wake up with a little peeled skin in my mouth that I need to rinse out. I thought this was just a normal reaction that everyone had to mouthwash, and we are all just enduring it, and that the big toothpaste companies make things that are too harsh. He was like, that's not normal. Story 35. That sunlight is essential for your health. Growing up pretty sheltered, I was rarely allowed to spend time outside. On top of that, constantly hearing that too much sunlight causes skin cancer made me wary of the sun. Growing up in Asia, where lighter skin is preferred, just add to all of that. It wasn't until last year when my doctor told me I was deficient in vitamin D and calcium and recommended getting some early morning sunlight that I started exercising outdoors in the morning. My knee pain and low mood disappeared almost immediately, to the point that it felt almost embarrassing to admit how much of a difference it made. Story 36. Myself and 3 engineers at my work, precision electronics manufacturer for NATO and space sectors, had an employee inform us EDT is just EST, but with daylight savings time applied. Something tells me we should probably find new jobs. Story 37. I thought that movie theater screens were blurry, and that was something everyone knew about, and they just accepted it. I was confused as to why people preferred the theater over watching something at home. Turns out I'm nearsighted. Story 38. That school reunions aren't organized by local government or the school. Honestly, this was an embarrassing one. Now I know it seems obvious that they're organized by ex-pupils who want to meet their old classmates. I genuinely thought they happened after a particular number of years had passed from the time you left school for everyone. Story 39. It took me a long time to realize there was more than one Apollo mission. I was always under the impression NASA landed there once, gave the Soviets the bird from space, and left forever. I saw Apollo 13 when I was young, but never picked up on the fact that wasn't the first attempt to make it to the moon. Story 40. I don't know if it's obvious to everyone, but in recent years I realized mental health is not a minority issue. Pretty much everyone is fucked up in their own way, barely holding it together, whether they are getting professional help for it or not. A little patience goes a long way, and it's best to not take it too personally if someone loses their shit on you. Most likely it has nothing to do with you. You were just there when the bomb went off. Story 41. Most, potentially all, rules about socializing, making friends. And I haven't figured out any of them yet, nor do I anticipate ever having a snowball's chance in hell of doing so. This is because there are too many rules in the first place, more than I can wrap my head around. Most, 90% of the rules are top secret, seemingly lest the socially savvy be deprived of an excuse to verbally abuse me. The rules that aren't top secret directly contradict each other and sometimes themselves. And the rules are, in my experience at least, constantly changing, and I'm not at all convinced it isn't for the sole purpose of keeping me, specifically and in particular, out of compliance with them. Or at least that's the impression I'm left with after almost 49 years of experience. Story 42. This is funny, but I'm Mexican, and for a long time I taught that American people, and in general citizens of English-speaking countries, also had 2 surnames, like we do in Mexico and other Spanish-speaking countries. So yeah, I was shocked when I found out that Donald Trump was just Trump and not Trump something. Story 43. Being a modern human is rarely any fun and seems to be mostly suffering, misery, loneliness, anxiety, and pain. Most of the humans who are living their best blissful lives are doing so at the expense of others. But I'd still rather be the rare human who's having fun than one of the sad and miserable ones, or cease to be human altogether, because this shit is hard, man. Story 44. I know it is mentioned too much and stuff, but I don't think people realize what kind of humiliating but also insanely freeing moment It is when you find out that you struggled with ADHD for 30 plus years, and that's why it always felt like you working against reality or something. Or it's truly wild, and I am not using it as an excuse. It's more like, okay, wow, well, okay, what? It's like you drove a race and barely made it fourth place out of 10 with all your might, and you're getting yelled at by fans that your performance sucked, and then you notice the handbrake was on the entire time. It is like having lived in a different reality. Story 45. Growing up, I always thought older people were these strong, well thought out people. It only occurred to me a couple years ago when I was reflecting on the fact while I've physically grown up and maybe matured a little, I am largely the same person I've always been since I was a teenager, yakini young adult, as most people are. Story 46. Dude, I am almost 40 and just learned a few weeks ago that you can make an insurance claim on the other person's insurance when you get into a car accident. Genuinely thought the exchange insurance information part of that interaction was just to make sure everyone had insurance, I guess. It seems so obvious, but it was never explained to me. And my dumb ass has always been paying my own deductibles and raising my own rates, even though I wasn't at fault now. Story 47. When driving on the interstate, and a sign says city name next number exits, it means that taking any of the upcoming number of exits will take you to said city. I always thought the signs meant in exit was the exist to get to city and thought it was silly because there was a perfectly good exit right after the sign. Why it took so long for it to click in my head. Story 48. From way back in my childhood, I thought everyone got pounding headaches that ramped up, hit a peak, and ebbed off when they got up from sitting or laying down, or coughed hard or laughed too hard, and that everyone had a pulsing head-pounding headaches when they tried to lay on their stomachs. Diagnosis of Chiari type, I made me realize that wasn't true. Weird how I just assumed we are a headachy people. Story 49. I'm severely red-green colorblind, which I did know, but I never thought it was a big deal. It wasn't until I got older how much I realized it was affecting me in everyday life. I get into arguments with people over what color something is, I still see colors, but basically I see a less variety of color. Here's a few examples. I can barely read red writing. On the bus, the red stop sign doesn't even look like it's on from some angles. I can't see a red laser very well. At work, I can't see red string lines. I can't see red flowers on a green bush. A lot of plants just look brown. I can't tell the difference between blue and purple. Different shades of the same color look the same, etc., etc. I never realized until recent years a lot of this stuff wasn't normal. At work, I'd always trip over the red string lines thinking I was just being clumsy, but eventually we started using yellow ones and I haven't tripped since. A funny one I remember while in a climbing gym, I was bouldering with some friends and I kept having to ask which was the blue and purple holds, as you could only use the same color holds. And my friends would think that's such a dumb question until I explained. Story 50. This is going to sound super weird, crazy, and maybe conceited, but I promise, I just have never seen myself as attractive or beautiful. I'm just insecure, and I'm working on it. My boyfriend took a photo of me. He's a photographer, and a good one at that. For the first time ever, I saw what other people can see. I'm not ugly. Oh, what a relief. I'm not ugly. I look okay. According to everyone who is kind to me, it is very obvious that I am a decent-looking person. But until he took that photo, I could never, ever see it. Now I do. I am so grateful for my boyfriend, 3. Story 51. In the movie Remember the Titans during training camp, one of the players yells out, "What is pain?" To which the rest of the team responds, "French bread." I thought they were comparing pain to something minuscule, i.e., French bread. I didn't realize what they meant as pain, as in the French word for bread, and I studied French in school for years. Story 52. It's pretty obvious, but I found that if I kept track of how I felt on any given day, just like in general about myself, the world, whatever, the only thing it consistently correlated with was getting enough sleep. Like even if life was being difficult, it was way less difficult if I had enough sleep. And if life was being good, having not enough sleep made it difficult. It's obvious, I guess, but the degree to which mood and sleep are connected seemed like a revelation. The world's dumbest life hack. And on that note, it's time for bed. Story 53. Most people are mean, greedy, selfish, and will only act kind when there's someone they need to look good in front of. True character is what you do when no one is watching, and I've realized that most people are cruel. I genuinely am kind. I enjoy helping people and building them up with confidence through compassion and cannot be cruel. It has made me very disappointed and sad in this world that has unlimited potential to be so wonderful for everyone. Yet we seem to teach competition and selfishness from a very early age and in all institutions. While empathy and compassion are only for show and to deceive others into getting what you want from them. It's a hard world to be a sensitive soul in. I understand the reasons why it's this way, and from the perspective of the powerful, you want people competing and fighting each other for limited spots in the hierarchy. I just wish we could find a better way to help and support our fellow humans and live in a more peaceful and civilized society, not so divided, self-absorbed, and status-driven. Hate feels good, it feels so good, but love always feels better. Story 54. That when typing, you can use the Ctrl+C+D and Shift keys to navigate text more easily. Some examples. Ctrl+backspace deletes the previous word. Ctrl+C+D plus delete deletes the following word. Ctrl+C+D plus arrow keys navigates by word rather than by character and by paragraph rather than by line. Ctrl+C+D plus Shift plus arrow keys selects by word rather than by character. I'm sure there's more, but having used a computer my whole life, I'm now 38. This has been a game changer, and I don't know how I never figured it out before. Story 55. Not me, but my wife. We were traveling and a Doobie Brothers song came on. I was talking about their transformation from a rock band to something else when Michael McDonald took over singing. I said a band named Doobie Brothers should be a rock band, and she asked why. I said, you know what a doobie is, right? She laughed and said, I never realized what the name stood for until this minute. Story 56. One time my partner and I were in a smoke shop getting a cigar for my father's birthday. She picks up a bag of pipe cleaners by the register and says, why the hell is a smoke shop selling craft stuff like pipe cleaner? And then goes silent and turns white. The cashier just had a big shit-eating grin on his face while we checked out but didn't say a word. Story 57. I only recently realized that people don't think about you nearly as much as you think they do. I used to worry a lot about how I came across, what I said, how I looked, small mistakes, but then it hit me. Everyone's mostly focused on themselves. It's obvious in hindsight, but it takes time or a few awkward moments to really understand that on a deeper level. Story 58. That I have visual snow. I've always had it, but didn't know that it wasn't normal. I even asked my mom once, what are the little specks in the air? And she had no idea what I was talking about. She said they must be dust particles, which didn't make any sense to me because they were easier to see when the lights were off. Story 59. Despite trying to do good things in life, I still deal with a lot of inner toxicity and anger. I grew up for a long time believing I was just a terrible person fighting the inevitable. Later on, I realized I was just surrounding myself with terrible people who were constantly poking and trying to goad anger out of me. Good people feel anger too. We just choose to let it slide when it's the best thing to do. Story 60. I had just finished flying a night mission. I landed on the ship, shut down, and filled out the logs. Then I went into the wardroom to get a cup of bug juice. A movie was playing on the TV. It was of Mice and Men, the original 1939, with Burgess Meredith as George and Lon Chaney Jr. as Lenny. I had never seen the movie. The next thing I hear is Lenny talking about the bunny rabbits, George. I had gone 30 years without knowing the abominable snowman in Looney Tunes was making fun of this movie. Story 61. It's actually okay to not love a family member you once used to. Love isn't a constant. It can't survive in a vacuum, can only withstanding so much, and it isn't owed to absolutely no one. It's not a moral failure on your part to give up on it when someone else already did it for both of you. Story 62. You're not an empath. You grew up in an environment where caregivers could be unpredictable and dangerous. So you developed a hypervigilance that scans for tiny changes in behavior in everyone so you can protect yourself. This is draining your energy and your social relationships suffer. Story 63. Why we can't just print money. When one person dared to ask, there will always that guy who would make you feel like it should be common sense. Like that's supposed to be common knowledge. And Google would give you answers that would just confuse you even more, especially if English is not your first language. But I did figure it out recently on my own. Proud of that. Story 64. If you're not putting yourself first, you cannot be there for anyone else. I used to put my loved ones before me, to the point where I was stressed and depressed AF. When I was depressed, guess what I couldn't do? Be there for anyone else. Or if I was there, I was grumpy and full of resentment. Putting myself first and learning boundaries has made me a better family member and friend. Story 65. That I'm beautiful. People aren't staring at me because I'm ugly. They're staring because I'm stunning. I've caused a couple of car incidents because the driver was distracted by me. I always thought people were staring at my asymmetrical face. But that's part of what makes me beautiful. People aren't nice to me because I'm nice to them. They're nice because of the way I look. Story 66. Been learning to drive lately at 33. I take my road test next week, so that's exciting, but it's such a pain in the ass to learn as an adult instead of growing up. My parents neglected me pretty bad, and my dad didn't want to pay the money for me to take the class when I was in high school. You'd think would want to learn an essential skill, but genuinely, no one in my family would teach me. Story 67. I realize people will pretend to be a closer friend than they really want to be out of politeness. I really don't think it's polite, and I'm ashamed that it took me till middle age to realize it. I'm not mad at it, just wish I knew what was up instead of trying to maintain relationships others didn't really want. I'd rather watch TV. Story 68. To be completely honest, that being the helpful one doesn't actually result in people liking you. All my life, I was taught to volunteer to help others. I made it a major part of my personality to do so, and to make sure others knew they could ask me for anything, and I'd try my best to make it happen. I've cultivated skills that are not all that common so that I can use them to help others as well as myself. Now I'm 40 years old with no friends, just friendly work acquaintances, and having not been on a date since high school. If I died tomorrow, the only person I can say with certainty would be sad as my mother. If my mom didn't tell her, I'm pretty sure my sister wouldn't realize I was dead for a month or more. Green said, if the women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy. I always liked that saying until I realized it's complete bullshit. People don't care if you're handy. They'll only keep you around if they like you, find you handsome. Story 69. No, so recently, but it blew my mind to understand that air is a fluid, just like water. Trying to see the world as if air is water and regular water is just something denser made me get a better grasp on what pressure, winds, flying really were. Maybe all those years learning to ignore air resistance made me ignore air altogether. Story 70. A few years ago, I found out the term spendthrift apparently means someone who spends a lot of money. I always thought it was someone who was careful with money. It has the word thrift right in it. I still don't understand why it means the opposite. Story 71. My parents live next to a field, and I've always wondered why the owners plant grain so late after they've had the field overgrown with hay for like half the summer. Last summer, I realized that they're literally growing hay. Like for animals. It's a hayfield. I'm 36, and my parents have lived in that house for 30 years, lol. Story 72. Not every friendship needs to be a super close relationship. Some friendships will literally just focus on one hobby, interest. Some will never know your family members' names or your hometown. I grew up having a very quality over quantity approach to relationships, and I still do. But that doesn't mean that you have to preclude less deep friendships. It's not a failed friendship, it's just a more casual one. Story 73. Stop arguing online. I know it's easy to fall into that trap. I still do sometimes, but there's been studies done, and no one is changing minds arguing online. Sounds corny, but if you focus more on putting good vibes out, it's better for your mental health and literally makes the world a better place, even if just a little. Story 74. The lyric, they put bread in my jar and say, man, what are you doing here? I have no idea why I always assumed it was people treating Billy Joel like shit. It's not like I didn't know bread is a slang term for money. I just never connected the dots. It's funny to me now that I just imagine people stuffing garbage food in his tip jar and making fun of him for being there. Story 75. That most people don't grasp mathematical concepts as easily as me. I had heard that everyone's least favorite subject was math my entire life, and I thought it was because people thought it was boring, which of course is part of it, but it was actually because it was difficult for most people. I just understood mathematical concepts really easily. I took AP Calculus as a freshman in high school and ended up getting my PhD in mathematics. I just assumed everyone thought it was boring. And that is why they said they hated math. My wife was the one that explained it to me that it was because it was difficult for people to learn, along with it being super boring to most people. This is not at all a brag because I absolutely hate English and reading and have so my entire life and have had English being my most difficult subject for as long as I remember. Story 76. It took me a long time to understand that in order to have baby chickens, the egg needs to be fertilized by a male chicken. I thought eggs that the hen sits on become chickens, and eggs they don't sit on become our food. As a child, I wasted many an egg sitting on it trying to make a chicken. I thought male chickens were selectively bred by humans to get them up for work before alarm clocks were invented. They never taught this in school, plus it was difficult for me to visualize how a shelled object could be fertilized. I understand now and live a happier life. Story 77. When I was a drunk, I was a functional alcoholic, and I thought I never got hangovers. I just thought that was how mornings felt for everyone. Only after I had quit drinking for a while did I realize it was just the alcohol that made mornings feel like that. I felt like everyone else had been cheating, had an unfair advantage over me. All this time with their clear heads and energy even in the morning. Story 78. I got a couple. My wife and my mom had a great one that's too good to not share. Stars in the night sky are suns a very long way away. Me? Well, it took me over 30 years to realize the word is not monopoly. It's monopoly. Just something that nobody ever corrected me on when I was little, and here we are. Story 79. The Winnie the Pooh characters Roo and Kanga got their names from being kangaroos. Pickles or cucumbers soaked in vinegar or something, they don't just come like that. I get that I'm not a smart man, but if I'm being honest, the world had more whimsy when I thought nature naturally produced pickles, and that Kangas was a cool Aboriginal name. Story 80. That being angry and shaky in the middle of the day isn't normal. I'm always hungry and forget to eat, but I thought I just had a temper issue. I was talking to my mom one day and I told her I don't understand why I get so angry that I shake every afternoon. She told me to go eat something and then call her back. I felt a million times better. Love you, Mom. Thanks for reminding your adult daughter to eat. Story 81. That garbage bags come inside out, the tops of cream medicine caps have a point to pierce the tamper foil. Just because you weren't allowed to do something as a child doesn't mean you can't do it now, like buy a Costco-sized box of Cocoa Krispies or eat whatever you want for any meal. Free will is amazing. And if you want a turkey sandwich at 10 a.m., who's going to stop you? Story 82. You don't need to spend hours every week matching socks and folding them into a ball for your family. Each family member, especially the kiddos, get one type of sock, comes straight out of dryer into sock drawer. 15 men saved a week, eaters approximately 10 hours saved over a lifetime. But discounting that you're not matching and folding socks until you're 21, you're looking at approximately 750 hours. That's about 31 days of your life, not folding or matching socks. Story 83. Communication is the most important thing in a relationship. It sounds so stupid now when I look back, but I genuinely thought we were just super chill with each other. But in reality, we both failed to communicate our needs, and everything fell apart. I've had many relationships, but none were as serious for me as this one, and I totally fucked it up by not communicating. Story 84. How much of my life was up to me? I thought the cavalry was coming to save me, but one day it hit me. It was up to me to build the life I wanted. It was like my prefrontal cortex placed that last cinder block and everything made sense. Instantly changed my life. Lost 150 kilo obese by changing my eating habits and running, got a new job that was better for my mental health, joined in community and volunteering efforts, etc. It was honestly weird once that realization hit that I could control my own life. I jumped into action. Anyway, felt like this was something obvious to most, but it just didn't occur to me. Story 85. I'm 27. I found this out a couple months ago. Overalls or coveralls, the one-piece suit janitors wear, are meant to go over clothes. Aside from it being in the name, I wear overalls, jumpsuits, and dungarees pretty fucking regularly, so you'd think I'd know this. But I spent about 15 minutes ranting to my boyfriend about why the fuck do my new work overalls have holes in the side, to have him stare him at me, laugh, and say, "So you can get your wallet out of your jeans." Took me a minute to understand. Still upset about this revelation. My work overalls don't chafe my thighs anymore, though. Story 86. Some people go through life with zero curiosity or thought about things outside themselves. I've been oblivious to shit, but only because you are thinking of other things. There are apparently a lot of people that have zero thoughts about things that don't directly relate to themselves right now. I always assume people that missed obvious things were otherwise occupied. Story 87, that my ex had an OnlyFans behind my back whenever we were together. Went through the old photos, and all of them have her face cropped out, showing everything below her nose so you could only see just her smile and then the rest of her body. After some investigating, I confirmed it was real. I remember asking her during the relationship, and she vehemently denied it. I was stupidly too trusting of her word. So she was sending me personal photos that she was selling online. Just one of the many fucked up things she did and lied about throughout our relationship of 12 years. Ended up catching her cheating red-handed, and she even still tried to deny it. Good riddance. Story 88. Not sure if this is quite the right kind of answer, but after having the appliance for nearly 10 years, I only just figured out that I can set my oven to go on at a certain time. This is huge. I have a job that makes getting dinner on the table at a reasonable hour a challenge, and being able to use that delay start function and have the oven already preheated and ready to go when I finish my work is a game changer. It buys me like 20 minutes or more, which is more significant than it sounds. 9.5 years that button has been right there in front of my face, multiple times a day, and I've only just realized this. Story 89. I'm gonna sound super late to the party, but I've only recently realized that it's way more efficient to do laundry on a Sunday evening. Like everyone knows this, right? But I used to be one of those people who waited until Wednesday and then had to rush through washing, drying, and folding because I knew I'd forget about it otherwise. Now my Sundays are pretty chill, and the rest of the week is drama-free when it comes to clothes. Has anyone else gone through a similar epiphany? Story 90, I recently learned that unconditional love was not a myth or exclusively from pets. I've had a life of abuse and gaslighting, starting with my parents, and now at 45, I have a partner who is actually understanding, patient, accepts me as I am, and allows me to feel safe. He said to me one day, "I love you unconditionally," and I nearly laughed, and then felt a lifetime's worth of abusive words and actions stand up to defend themselves. I realized in that moment I genuinely thought being loved that way was impossible, even though I do it myself. Story 91. I thought that in my teens, sheer 20s, I was a really average-looking guy with tons of charm and game, so I did well with women despite being plain. With the benefit of hindsight, I've realized that I was autistic as fuck, but made up for my lack of charm or game with my looks. Story 92. I have to admit my embarrassment. When I first started my relationship with my SO, I put too much me into the we. I would sign us up for commitments without talking to him first, as if his own schedule and hobbies should take second place to relationship goals one. I was forgetting the fact that his hobbies and interests were things that attracted me to him in the first place. He was starting to resent the fact that he lost control over his own schedule. I had to learn that he's my partner, not my accessory. We're doing fine now, which is great because we're getting married next month. Story 93, that I have an eating disorder called ARFID, EM38, and have spent my entire life avoiding food and drinking a soda when I was hungry. I just got a dietitian who diagnosed me and was told it's from growing up without guaranteed food in the house. Apparently, as a coping mechanism, I stopped caring about food. I still don't like eating. It's very hard for me to recognize hunger and then eat. Also, my brain does this stupid thing where it tells me food is bad and is gonna make me sick, and it tells me not to eat. Fun stuff. I honestly thought I was like everyone else. People knew I was a picky eater, but they didn't think more of it because I've either been a healthy weight or overweight. Apparently, the food I do eat is unhealthy and I store the fat. It wasn't until my current BF noticed something was wrong because I was living off of like half a meal a day and he made me get help. Story 94. It's since I met my wife, but we were looking up at the stars, and she said something like, "They look like pinholes through a black piece of paper." I couldn't understand what she was talking about. My shitty astigmatic eyes didn't ever see them as dots, just flared, smeared bursts of light. I never realized it. I mean, this was in my 30s. A grown-ass man, realizing he'd never seen a star in all its perfect glory. Story 95, that if you have no questions for a job interview, that means they assume you're not interested anymore and are being polite. For the longest time, I was like, why is everybody rejecting me? Isn't it good to not have questions? Because I assumed that having no questions meant you studied up and understood the job posting. I guess it makes sense now, but it's still a weird thing to get used to. Story 96. Growing up, I was told to eat the crust on sandwich bread because it had the most nutrients. Mentioned the crust having more nutrients to a group recently, and everyone just kind of looked at me and basically said my parents were fooling me, and it's all the same bread, just toasted more. Hit me like a light switch got turned on how much sense that made. Story 97. I was a child when Bon Jovi's Dead or Alive came out, and I thought he was singing He Was a Cowboy on a steel horse I ride. Just a few hours away from where I grew up, there was a place called the IX Indoor Amusement Park. All the cool older kids used to love going to the IX Indoor Amusement Park. So I assumed that the steel horse I ride was one of those really intense rides that cool older kids loved. Many years later, when I no longer had being 9 as an excuse, the iPod iPhone came out, and I thought, makes sense. People already think of iRides as really intense, cool rides, so people will think this new iPhone is a really intense, cool phone. Literally just a few years ago, I heard somebody refer to a motorcycle as a steel horse, and you'd think that would be my aha moment, but yeah, no. Later that same day, I asked my friend, wait, so when Bon Jovi sang about a steel horse I ride, was he actually singing about a motorcycle I ride and not a horse I ride? And then we had the worst who's on first conversation, like my friend said, yeah, a motorcycle he rides. And I ask, he rides the motorcycle I ride? And my friend says, you ride? No, just him. And I say, no, not I ride, like I'm riding it, but I ride like an I ride. And my friend asks, what? No, a BTF is an I ride? Ride. He rides. And that is when I realized that I rides don't exist. And the iPod name was, I guess, not piggybacking off of any existing cool thing. Story 98. My wife is a OT and works with other OTs. I randomly mentioned in a conversation that I deconstruct stuff in my head into an exploded view to know how they work, even if I never opened it. Everyone was impressed, except her one colleague. She pulled me aside, asked me a few questions. Turns out I have ADHD. I just thought everyone did stuff like that. I have a handle on it because how I was raised. But everything made more sense. BTW, I am in aviation, and it my absolute passion. If it wasn't, she said, I would have never be able to study the manuals or pass exams. My recall is impressive, but learning for my coding exams is so horrible. Story 99. All it takes is one bad clickbait type article to get someone down a rabbit hole of misinformation and bullshit that they probably won't get out of on their own. As soon as they click that first headline and get their algorithm in the mood for some wild conspiracy theories, that's all they're going to see, and eventually they'll see another headline they think is interesting, and then that's all she wrote for their critical thinking skills. It took a long time to click for me. I see nothing but horror and Marvel articles, and it's the same for someone thinking people in Ohio get their McDonald's with a side of the neighbor's cat. Obviously, there are a ton of people that are too far gone, but I still try to be a little more patient and do what I can to nudge someone in the right direction, instead of staring at them dumbfounded. Story 10. This is a little embarrassing to admit, but for years I genuinely thought that the little arrow next to the gas gauge in a car pointed to which side of the car your gas tank was on, purely by coincidence. Like sometimes it was on the left, sometimes on the right, and the arrow just happened to be near it. It wasn't until a friend pointed it out during a road trip that my mind was blown. I felt like I'd unlocked some ancient automotive secret that everyone else had known since kindergarten. The sheer convenience of it. No more pulling up to the wrong side of the pump like a total newbie. Story 1. Severe pain cramps were not normal. I got really painful cramps to the point of fainting. I just assumed everyone felt the same way and that my body was just weak. But nope. After a few more instances of fainting, I went to a doctor and got diagnosed with PCOS. I surprisingly have pretty high pain tolerance to have survived that long without meds. Story 2. That is not normal to only be able to breathe with the mouth if you have a cold or take a shower. Until I moved, had a new doctor, which realized that due to some growth in my nose, I was only able to breathe on like half the capacity a human should. After the operation, I felt like a new person. Breathing is that overpowered. I feel healthier, and I always thought I am simply not a sports person. Now I love it. Story 13. Technically, I didn't figure it out, but a few months ago, I was with my sister while eating a breakfast sandwich, and I got the hiccups. After a couple of minutes of hiccuping, my sister got irritated and told me to drink some water already. I did so, and the hiccups stopped. So basically, I've gone my entire life occasionally hiccuping after eating foods containing bread, and it never occurred to me that it was a sign that I needed to drink something. Story 14. Very recently learned this because of all the stuff that happened in the Vatican. Legally, any country can call itself a state. The only requirement for a state, paraphrasing obviously, is that it has a government that no one else can tell them what to do. And in most places around the world, countries call themselves states. So for example, the Vatican, which also calls itself Vatican City, can legally call itself a state, even though it's a country. There's a group of countries in the Baltic that call themselves the Baltic states, even though they're all countries. The United States can also call itself a state, even though it's made up of states. Japan calls itself the state of Japan, even though it's a country. It gets even weirder. The UK can legally call itself both a state and a country, despite the fact that it's made up of 4 countries. Story 1-5. I am a decent hobby musician, played piano since age 3, French horn in grade school, dabble on the uke and accordion, can read music, but it's always been clunky for me, and I rely heavily on having a good ear. Anyway, it only clicked in this week for the first time ever that the first space in the bass clef is A, and then it just goes A, B, F, G, A, B, C, etc. from there. I'd always been taught the all cows eat grass mnemonic for the bass clef and figured notes out from there, counting up and down. I'm a touch dyslexic or neurodivergent, so I think my brain just never put it together. Anyway, it's honestly life-changing. Story 1-6. A full moon happens when the moon rises at sunset. If I learned this in school, I never fully got it. I'm Jewish, and I also didn't know until a few years ago how many of our holidays are tied to the moon phases. I knew it about Ramadan and East Asian festivals, but not my own holidays. Story 107. I'm fairly athletic and have always had athletic friends. When we reached mid to late 20s and beyond, I started gaining weight, losing muscle. We used to play sports together. Then life got busier and hangouts became pretty much just dinners or drinks. I spent enough time with my friends thinking they were doing the same routines as me, but they all had exercise factored into their lifestyles and were doing things like going for runs after dinners with their spouses, yasha families, or biking to work, going to the gym, playing on teams, etc. There's a serious bell curve you don't want to be on the wrong side of when you approach 30. It's not solely genetics, it's a lifestyle. Incorporate those routines as soon as you can. If you don't move, you'll gain, and then things get worse from there. Story 1-8. I didn't know much about IQ and various aspects of it until my son was tested. Apparently, we both have high processing speed, meaning we process things faster than average people in our heads. This explains why I'm so frustrated sometimes, and it's not other people's fault. It also made me realize I must have been quite annoying as well. Story 1-9. I didn't realize people can visualize things with their eyes closed. I see black with nothing when I close my eyes. Different shades of black if there's a light on. I learned on Reddit that people can actually see things they think about. I understand the concept of the item and try to visualize, but it's just my mind thinking of an item like an apple. I can't actually see an apple when I close my eyes and think of it. I think that's why I've never been good at drawing or painting art. I always tell my mom that I would be a really bad witness at describing, drawing her likeness if she ever disappears, so she better not go anywhere. Story 1-10. That people don't think or talk about you as much as you believe. They think about you about as much as you think of them, which is not that much. And those things you did or said that now make you cringe inside, nobody remembers or cares. Think of 10 cringe-worthy things you witnessed other people do in real life, i.e. not something viral or that made the news. That's how memorable your stuff is. If you did make the news, I'm sorry. Also, I grew up in New England and spent plenty of time in places like New York and New Hampshire. But I was in my 5th decade of life before I realized there had to be a Zealand out there somewhere. Story 111. I thought it was normal to have intense pain wearing shoes. I was talking to a friend and was like, you know when you're wearing shoes after a bit and you get that pain along the side of your foot? No. And it wasn't until a boyfriend pointed out my oddly shaped feet. Even then I said, no, it's normal, and he had to ask my friend to show me it was not. I had pretty severe bunions. Never occurred to me in 25 years to look at other people's feet. Double bunionectomy later and no more pain. Story 112. Oh. Since I was a kid, I've always felt like I've been the only one left out of an inside joke. I think the inside joke is that the world is run by ambition, ego, and selfishness, and that is not a bad thing. It's just survival. Like there are so many songs about the world's gonna knows my name, we are the champions, yada yada, And I thought that was all sort of make-believe, if that makes sense. But no, that's just how people are. It's what people want, and I never really understood it. I.e., I have no sense of self-preservation, no ambition, I just like helping people out. Story 113. Brushing your teeth isn't supposed to hurt. I have hypersensitivity to taste. Some intense flavors cause pain, and spearmint, peppermint, are among those that cause me to feel pain, while normal mint doesn't. The pain from the intense mint flavor in toothpaste was causing me incredible pain whenever I brushed my teeth, and it wasn't until I tried a non-mint toothpaste that I learned it wasn't supposed to hurt. I still struggle to bring the toothbrush to my teeth and start brushing because my brain still connects it with the pain and is trying to stop me hurting myself. Story 114. I could never wrap my head around it when I asked someone what they're thinking, and they responded with nothing. What do you mean nothing? Obviously, you're always thinking about something, right? Wrong. I always describe my head as a wall of hundreds of TVs that are constantly on, where some are white noise, some are memories playing on repeat, some are random streams of consciousness, a couple are music channels, and most are analytical monologues. I used to cut myself because I found out that when I did, the noise would quiet down a bit. I slept an average of 4 hours through junior high because the constant stream of thoughts would keep me awake for hours, even when I adhered regular sleep hygiene. I thought that's what everyone's heads were like, but that I was just depressed and anxious. You've probably guessed it by now, but yes, turns out I have ADHD. I found out through taking study drugs, Ritalin, in pure desperation during university to finish my exam. My head went fucking silent. I spent the first 20 minutes contentedly staring at a tree and crying from relief. I even popped a pill before bed and fell asleep within 30 minutes instead of the regular 3 hours. After I stopped taking Ritalin, it hit me like a truck how disturbingly noisy my head actually is. Needless to say, I feel pretty fucking robbed of a good quality of life, as I was 23 when I discovered this and had already developed a heap of destructive coping mechanisms in order to survive. Story 115. Every time I heard shoulder width apart when being told how to stand in gym classes or for sports, I'd hear instead shoulder width apart and have no fucking idea what they were talking about. Took until some middle school basketball club thing for me to ask and get an answer, at which point I'd been confused for several years and never corrected. Story 116. Not me, but my husband. He didn't realize he had fibromyalgia for the longest time. It is really silly. He's been in constant pain his entire life, and he simply thought he was an anomaly. Never went to the doctor, never got diagnosed, never tried different stuff. When I found that out, I sent him to the doctor, and he got some pills that doesn't remove the pain entirely, but gives him a huge leap in quality of life and improves his sleep. Story 117. It wasn't normal to itch when playing in the grass as a kid. Spent more time itching my legs than playing. A quick comment one day and my friends replied with, "That doesn't happen to us." I was dumbfounded. Later in life, I thought it was normal to have some type of pain every day, ranging from a twitch or joint ache to a severe migraine. Nope, my friends said they live a pain-free life. Didn't understand how that was possible. Ended up getting a positive autoimmune test. I understood that the Earth did not temporarily turn into a rectangle, casting a rectangular shadow onto the moon, but it took me way too long a time to figure out what was going on. Story 119. Me having BPD and schizophrenia is not me just having a bad day. Lived for 30 years thinking that other people have similar problems, primarily because my mom and dad acted this way too. I hate to admit, but I punch walls, scream to the top of my lungs, and etc. Just like my parents. Turns out I was a spawn of a bunch of mentally unstable people, and their behavior made me think it was all a normal thing growing up. I mean, I really should have thought about it more, considering my mother ran over my dad with a car because my dad smashed her head with a watermelon. Not normal behavior when things don't go your way. Now I am medicated and doing therapy. I probably have years of fixing to do. Story 120. Not me, but a nugget from my dad. For years, he thought that the instruction, dilute to taste, on the squash bottle meant that you had to add water in order to taste the flavor, not that you could make it as strong or weak as you wanted. For non-Brits, squash is very concentrated juice that you add water to, creating a refreshing, non-carbonated beverage. About 5-10% squash and rest water, like FCOJ, but not frozen and much more concentrated.